Breaking just now, sources telling CNN that singer R. Kelly has just been indicted in Cook County, Illinois. Let's bring in CNN national correspondent Sarah Seidner in Chicago. Tell us what is happening here, Sarah. And just to reiterate, this just happened. So catch us up on what we know at this point.
It did. What we have learned from two sources who are familiar with the ongoings of the case is that there has been an indictment filed on Robert Sylvester Kelly, also known, of course, worldwide as the R&B singer R. Kelly. What we have learned over time is we first reported about the grand jury that had convened. We understand that that grand jury actually convened last week. It also convened this week, and that some of this has to do with the women that have come forward accusing him of some kind of sexual abuse. We also know that last week, attorney Michael Avenatti was able to hand over a tape to the state's attorney's office here in Chicago. And indeed, the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, as we understand it now from two sources, has indicted R. Kelly. We do not yet know, and we are efforting, trying to get a hold of the indictment to find out exactly what he has been indicted with. But this is a huge development. As you know, R. Kelly, back in 2008, went to trial. He went to trial on 14 counts of child pornography. He was acquitted in that trial. And in that trial, there was also physical evidence, including a videotape that prosecutors at the time says was a girl that was 13 years or 14 years old, and R. Kelly involved in sexual acts that had been recorded by R. Kelly, but he was acquitted on those charges because the jury said they simply could not positively, beyond a reasonable doubt, end up being able to identify R. Kelly or the girl, even though they brought in a lot of witnesses to say otherwise. There were witnesses in that particular case that said opposite things, and so the jury just was not able to go forward with a conviction. R. Kelly has always maintained that he is innocent of all the charges and accusations that have been coming at him for the past 20 years. Now, here we are in 2019, 11 years after that case went to trial and he was acquitted. We are seeing now more charges against singer R. Kelly.
And what does CNN know about that tape you mentioned that Michael Avenatti turned over to the state's attorney's office? This is material that CNN has been able to verify the content of, right?
That is correct. I watched the tape. It was extremely disturbing. On that particular tape, there was a picture that was fairly clear. It was much clearer, according to two sources who have seen both tapes, the one that was given to a jury in 2008 and the one that this grand jury apparently saw, according to our sources. On that tape, there was a very, very clear room, and I want to warn people about what I am about to say because it is disturbing information to have to listen to. And I won't go into too many details, but what we saw was a girl on the tape and a man who appeared to be R. Kelly, completely nude, constantly changing the camera, making sure that you could see the entire scene, the entire sex acts that were happening. There were multiple sex acts on that tape. There was urination going on that was videotaped, and we heard the girl say over and over again, at least 6 times, she referred to her 14-year-old genitalia. And he, in turn, a couple of times, also mentioned her 14-year-old genitalia. And so we know that that has been in the hands of prosecutors for quite some time now. We understand that that tape was used also with the grand jury, but there have been other witnesses, and we are told by at least two sources that there have been other witnesses who have been coming in and out of the grand jury for several days, that this grand jury has been brought together, and they've been listening to details that has to do with R. Kelly and the alleged sexual abuse or sexual acts potentially with minors and other women. We will have to get the details for you when it comes to what this indictment actually says, but this is big news. And as you might imagine, there has been this whole series that came out in January called Surviving R. Kelly on Lifetime. That series certainly had to do with some of the people coming forward at this time. You heard from many, many women on that particular series who talked about their relationships relationships and accused R. Kelly of having relationships with them when they were minors. And I have spoken to one of the women that was involved in that series, and she says she feels relieved, but she really wants to see the details of what this is. But again, we should mention that there has been an indictment, according to two sources with knowledge of this case, that R. Kelly has been indicted. We are trying to get the charges that he has been indicted on, Brianna.
All right, Sarah Seidner, stand by for us. Thank you for bringing us all of that information on the story that has just broken. R. Kelly indicted. I want to bring in Ariva Martin, CNN legal analyst, and also Clay Kane, Sirius XM host. Ariva, what's your reaction to this? And we're awaiting. We have to be very clear, as Sarah was. We are working to obtain this indictment and see exactly what the charges are. But what do you think about what we know so far?
This is blockbusting kind of news, Brianna. Women for the last 2 decades have been talking either privately, publicly, and definitely on the documentary that Sarah mentioned about being abused by R. Kelly as teenagers. There was just a press conference held with Gloria Allred and 2 victims who said that R. Kelly had sex with them when they were minors. So there are a lot of women in the Me Too movement, in the Mute R. Kelly movement, I think, who are going to feel some sense of relief hearing about this indictment. They're going to feel that justice is being served. It's been a big issue in terms of, some of the women being taken seriously, some of their claims being taken seriously. Some women in the movement believe that because these were African American women, that they were not being believed in the same way that women who are not African American are believed when they come forward to talk about sexual abuse and sexual assault. So this is a huge story. As you mentioned, Brianna, we don't have all the details for the indictment, but I can't emphasize enough how many women, I'm sure, are feeling a sense of relief and feeling that this day has taken way too long to come, and they are going to anxiously await to see what this indictment may mean for prosecution, as well as hopefully some kind of conviction for what we know have been charges against R. Kelly that have been mounting for 2 decades.
And Clay, I know you have been following R. Kelly's career. You have been following all of this information as it has come to light recently. What's your reaction?
This is a long time coming. I can recall years ago, I wrote a timeline of R. Kelly's allegations. I mean, this goes back, 24 years to when he allegedly married a 15-year-old girl, the late, great R&B singer Aaliyah. He's been doing this reportedly in plain sight. And it really goes back to what we were saying before as far as victims not being believed. What kind of victims are not being taken seriously? And black women especially are in that group of victims who are not being believed. So I really, truly hope from my soul that time is up for this R&B singer. And I want to shout out executive producer Dream Hampton, who did Surviving R. Kelly, Jamila Lemieux, so many black women who have been at the forefront of making sure that justice is served for all the women who have been reportedly abused by R. Kelly. Time is up, hopefully.
And listening to what Sarah said, I mean, the awful details about this tape aside, if we can just focus on the fact that she said he appears to be identifiable in this tape as compared to the other tape that a jury saw before when it acquitted him on charges. They said they couldn't be sure that was him, even though, Ariva, you heard Sarah, you're familiar with this. A lot of people testified that it was him, and yet a jury still forgave him, essentially, and didn't believe that this was true, didn't believe that it could be legitimized to the point where they would have found him guilty. What is there a statute of limitations here, though? I wonder, because Sarah was saying this was a VHS tape.
Yeah, there are statutes of limitations that make it sometimes very difficult for prosecutors to bring these cases forward. I think one thing to note, Brianna, about the 2008 case is the victim that was in that videotape. She did not testify in that trial, and jurors who talked about deliberating on that case, that was a big issue for them. That was a sticking point for them, the fact that the victim herself did not come forward and testify. And they did talk about not being able to make a positive identification of R. Kelly. Based on what Sarah has said about this new videotape, that's not an issue. The issue of identification of R. Kelly appears to be not the issue in this new tape. But we don't know about this victim. We haven't heard a whole lot, Brianna, about this victim. Is this victim one of the people that testified before the grand jury that has indicted R. Kelly? Is this victim someone who's willing to come forward and testify at a trial? I agree that the R. Kelly documentary gave voice to so many women and gave women who had been victimized by R. Kelly, I think, the courage to come forward and tell their stories. And apparently the Cook County District Attorney was able to talk to some of those women, talk to other victims, and to have them tell their stories. And that's very powerful for what's happening today.